So you were just a toddler when your dad carried out this incredible crime.
Yeah.
What did you know about what was happening for those 5 years that you were on the run, essentially, when you were a child?
For those 5 years, as far as I was concerned, my dad was a wealthy businessman, and we were just on one very big extended holiday. That's really, really what it felt like. And I mean, particularly when we were living in Mexico, we were living with the top 5% there. My dad rented an apartment off the president of the Bank of Mexico. And it was a penthouse place that had the bath was a small marble swimming pool, and I had a very luxurious upbringing, and I went to school there with the children of the American diplomats that were over there from the U.S. Embassy, and because I never picked up any anxiety or any stress from either my mother or my father. I had no reason to suspect that anything was wrong. It was only when we had to leave Mexico suddenly, and then we went to Canada and we tried to get papers there. And when they didn't come through, my dad decided something was not quite right, and so we fled Canada, which was just as well, because not long after that, Charlie Wilson, one of the Great Train Robbers, who was living in Quebec at the time, ended up getting a knock on the door, and Tommy Butler, the head of flying squad, was there with 50 mounted Canadian police. And so we then moved back to the south of France, where my dad had spent a lot of time before. And then he came back to England to do another robbery, and it was only so all of that moving around made me kind of question really what he did, and in trying to make sense of it all, really, I guess, and the fact that during those 5 years I had about 5 different passports and identities myself, let alone my mum and my dad, and having these images of my mind, remembering seeing him through glass bottom boats in scuba gear in Mexico, and the fact he was so well dressed. I mean, he kind of based himself on Cary Grant in the film To Catch a Thief, He had the same tailor, the same shirt maker, Turnbull and Asser, he got his shoes made at Lobbs, the Queen's Cobblers. And so in trying to, I guess I must have thought he had to be a spy. And so when the police actually came...
Where were you when that happened?
It was
when the knock
Torquay.
came?
It was about 7 a.m. The doorbell rang, and I was upstairs. My bedroom was next to my parents, and... the door rang, and I shouted, "Doorbell, Dad," and he said, "Can you get it? It's probably the neighbour." And I ran downstairs and opened the door, and next thing I know, there was a flurry of police came storming in, straight up the stairs. Somehow I got caught up in the melee and ended up being deposited outside my bedroom, and they all marched into my dad's, and I couldn't really figure out what was going on, but I wasn't scared because, as far as I was concerned, these guys were the good guys, and my dad was a good guy. So in my innocence, I thought perhaps, this was a scene sort of reminiscent of like Le Carre's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. I thought he was being rescued until I saw my mum crying, and then my dad came in with Tommy Butler, and he was the head of flying squad, and said, Dad's been a very naughty boy, and he's got to go away for a long time. And I was kind of dumbstruck.
And you were just 5 years old at the time?
I was 7.
You were 7 by that point.
Yeah.
And before we go to speak to Martin about sort of what happened next in terms of your dad's prison sentence, how did life change for you as a 7-year-old, having had this really privileged upbringing up until that point? Did your lifestyle get impacted once your dad was arrested?
Oh, most definitely, because
What happened?
I think for those 5 years I'd been with him pretty much, all the time, and I'd spent more time with my father than most kids get to spend, up until their teens with their parents, and so I developed a really close bond to him. So suddenly being torn away from him was, obviously quite catastrophic for me.